play fake to Walker. Sam rolls out near side. Throw is made. Touchdown! Seahawks! Jackson Smith-Njigba from 12 yards. Second and 4 from his own 34. McMahon throws intercepted again. It's Jobe. He's inside the 20, the 15, the 10, the 5. Touchdown Seahawks. 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns for the Seahawks. A 34-yard return. Lofa Katupu, welcome to the NFL, baby. 35, he's on the run, Lynch. 40, pushes the man, 35, look at him go. He's down to 20, 15, he could go. He is going to go. Touchdown Seahawks. Oh my word. A 67-yard run.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the Hawks Eye podcast. And as always, every 2 weeks, it is a State of the Hawks episode. Mookie Alexander joining me. But again, based on time frames, we're going to double up. We're going to do a State of the Hawks, and we're doing a Bucs preview show. So you get me and Mookie for a little bit more time tonight. But Mookie, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm stoked for this weekend. I mean, it's a big, big weekend for Seattle sports. If you're a football fan, you got the Seahawks and Buccaneers, the double throwback uniform game, the two teams that entered this league in 1976. And it's an important game. It is the only matchup on the schedule between two teams above 500 right now. Seattle's 3-1, Tampa's 3-1. I found it hard to believe it. Somebody on the social media on Twitter mentioned it on the Field Goals account. So that's pretty cool. And then if you're a Mariners fan, if you're a baseball fan, even if you aren't a baseball fan, hop on the Mariners bandwagon this weekend. You've got the Detroit Tigers in town for the ALDS on Saturday and Sunday. I'd love to know in the comments if anybody has managed to secure tickets to both games, to go to the Seahawks game at 1 and then go to game 2 of the ALDS at 5 or 5:30, whatever time that the first pitch is. And then if you're a soccer fan, the Sounders-Timbers rivalry continues. Seattle and Portland's always intense. So everything's happening with Seattle sports right now, but we're here to talk Hawks. And this is a big game. No two ways about it. This is a I don't want to say statement game, but this is a major measuring stick as far as how good Seattle is.
Yeah, it really is going to be a big measuring game. We're talking about basically this will be their first, outside of probably that San Francisco game, Mookie, their real first test against a relatively good team that we expect to be in the playoffs, be one of maybe the higher seeding teams, win their division in the NFC South. Yes, Tampa Bay's banged up, but as we found out today, and we'll discuss it, the Seahawks are a bit banged up in areas I don't think we all were thinking they were going to be after that small mini bye coming off the Arizona win. But yeah, everyone, if you're in the chat, get your comments on Twitter, your comments on YouTube in here. We've got great moderators in Amy and Victor and Ian Victor that'll be keeping you guys in check in that regard. So follow what they say. One interesting note already out of the show, I got to give props here to Dan from Seahawks Forever. Goes, I just made the best turkey sandwich, you guys, so I'm so excited to enjoy watching all of this. Well, Dan, I'm glad you had a turkey sandwich. It's a little early for me. Oh, actually not true. Canadian Thanksgiving is in October, so I'm looking forward to my turkey at some point. But Mookie, let's kind of talk about this State of the Hawks right now before we really get into anything. Quarter of the season mark's gone by. Or actually, we're just coming out of it, I guess. What would say is the biggest thing that stands out to you this first quarter of the Seahawks season?
Just how well coached they look. They're not committing 10, 11 penalties on the offensive line, it feels like, every week. I feel like they're a little bit more disciplined on the offensive side of the ball in terms of communication, chemistry, whether on the line or with quarterback and receiver. Again, not everything's perfect, but it just doesn't look so disjointed. And then defensively, even with the injuries, think really in the secondary, they've looked connected. We're not seeing loads of busted coverages or blown assignments that lead to explosive plays. And as a result, the Seahawks, I think, are number 1 in defensive DVOA. And look, it's week 5, so I'm not too hyped up about that. But if you just use other basic stats, the Seahawks are right now one of the top defenses in the league. And I think there's a little bit more realness to it than last year when they were putting up big numbers against Bo Nix in his debut, Skylar Thompson, and Jacoby Brissett. It's like this 3-1 start feels a lot different than last year's 3-1 start from that respect. So, yeah, I think that they just look like a very well-coached team on both sides. Well, in all 3 phases, as is the cliche. The special teams also looking much better coached compared to last year. So I have to give my props to the Seahawks coaching staff. in terms of how they're getting this team prepared. We're not seeing them look absolutely. We really haven't had a stretch in any game where they have looked bad on both sides of the ball. There might have been some lulls or bad spells here and there, but generally speaking, they haven't had like a wildly inept performance, which the same cannot be said for even last year's team or many of the Pete teams toward the end. So that's a big difference to me, that the coaching seems to have an effect in terms of how the players are performing on the field.
Yeah, and we'll get to talking about the coaching staff here in a bit, Mookie, because I kind of want to get your thoughts on where they're at year 2 of the Mike Macdonald regime, now that we've kind of got this little sample of this year kind of taken away in the offseason. But do you feel, I'm going to ask you this kind of interesting question, do you feel this team is playing closer to their floor right now or their ceiling?
I think they're pretty much close to their ceiling on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're closer to the floor on the offensive side of the ball, which is to say, well, you know what? I can break that down even further. I think they're closer to their ceiling in the passing offense than they are in the rushing offense. So the passing offense, I don't expect it to be substantially better. I anticipate that this is still going to be a JSN-dominated offense, even if guys like Horton and Arroyo get more involved, and Cooper Kupp's, gets more targets here and there. But I think Kupp is kind of, he is who he is at this point, which is he's there to move the chains. But if you're going to have like a game like he had in Pittsburgh, have that 5-6 times a year, that's not happening. But the running game, I think, is playing closer to the floor. I mean, they're kind of like league average at best, and they still have a league lead in run plays that are for no gain or for a loss. So if we can see that fixed, I think that would be huge for this offense to have a running game to rely upon, because there is going to come a time that the passing game is not going to look crisp. In fact, it already happened in week 1, where the passing game was largely shut down outside of Smith and Jigba, and the running game wasn't good enough to be a supporting actor, so to speak, and they only put up 13 points. So if the running game starts to gel a little bit more as the season progresses, then they're going to see a more well-rounded offense. I know somebody in the comments is going ceiling on defense. Seriously? I think, I mean, how much better can they perform? Like, you can't get higher than first. So I think that what you might mean by that is they start generating even more turnovers, like start forcing fumbles, start finishing sacks on the edge. But otherwise, I think that it is kind of how we expected, that the secondary is generally very good, and in fact better than expected in terms of the early performances of Jobe and Kendrick, even to offset the fact that Witherspoon's hardly played and Woolen has had his challenges. The linebacker play is Ernest Jones dominated, where Knight and Thomas are, their depth at this point, but they're not, I wouldn't call them like plus starters at the moment. And then the defensive front, especially in the interior, has played at an elite level. So that's kind of how I feel, that it's kind of in compartments, where if I set it as a whole, they might be a little bit closer to the ceiling. But when you peel the onion layers back, they've got areas where there is still significant room for improvement, mainly on the offensive side of the ball. That's for your time. It's your time to talk, Bryce. Yeah.
The thing I was going to ask you, Mookie, I asked Dana this yesterday on our live show, and what you just broke down with the team. The one thing I'll say about ceiling for the D, I think the thing they're missing is truly a elite pass rusher that can close out games. That's the one thing that I think would put this fully, like, you're literally hunched over at the top of the ceiling like this with this defense. Everything you said about the offense, I'm in agreement with. Like, they are still trying to get the flow of this thing working on all cylinders. The run game, it's there. Like, they're committed to it, which is what I love this year, is you're not seeing an abandonment from the run game when it's not going well. When you're running for negative yards or losing yards, it's not like Klint Kubiak goes, okay, cool, we're not running the ball anymore. We're going to go pass happy, like we saw with Ryan Grubb last year in a lot of situations. Like, they're still running it 30 times a game. It's like their sweet number is 30 to 35 rush attempts a game, and it limits Sam Darnold to not having to throw it 40 times a game. And so it kind of works out in that balance. But the question I asked Dana yesterday, and it's about the defense, and I want to get your take on it. What do you think is helping itself more? Is it the pass rush is helping the secondary more, or is the secondary playing so well it's actually helping the pass rush with its creating of pressure?
I think the pass rush being as high as it is in terms of pressure rate, pass rush win rate, whatever metric you want to use, I think that's helping the secondary more. And really it's just the fact that Mafe and Hall have done everything but get a sack. And now you had Chenna getting 2 sacks. Fortunately, we won't see Tank Lawrence this week, but even he's got a couple of pressures. And they're getting that interior pressure. We went from 1 sack or a half sack last year for Byron Murphy to 2.5 already. We know what Big Cat can do. And then Jaron Reed, of course, is just that veteran presence. So I think having a better defensive line is making things a lot easier for the back end of the defense, particularly with the struggles that they're having in terms of health and not having Love for what's going to be 2 games and not having Witherspoon so far for 3 games out of 5. And then, of course, Woolen has been healthy, but Woolen has also been inconsistent at best this year. So I think it's very much a case of the pass rush is helping the secondary more than the secondary is helping the pass rush, because there have been some times where I think the pressure has done enough to deter a quarterback from making an accurate pass to an open receiver. So, you win in the trenches, though. So if they're winning in the trenches, then it certainly eases the margin for error back in the secondary. I mean, compare that to years past, and I'll use the Pete years more than last year, where the total lack of a pass rush, like in 2020 before they traded for Dunlap, is how you end up with Shaquille Griffin and especially Trey Flowers basically taking turns giving up huge catches every week. And, Griffin I don't think is a bad corner, but Flowers definitely ended up getting his lumps because he just can't cover very well. And now you look at this year, and Woolen has had his mistakes. He's had his mental lapses. But for everybody else, even if they're getting beats or close to getting beat, these opposing quarterbacks are just not having enough time to do much anything substantive, and especially down the field.
No, and I think it's kind of this twofold thing. I think they both inevitably are helping each other out. To your point, the pass rush without blitzing is getting home. The secondary is also doing a really good job of not giving up the explosive plays this year. They're not giving up guys that are wide open by massive margins consistently. So I think they kind of are feeding off each other, which is great, which is a thing I think last year, because of the new defense, because of the new way Mike Macdonald does things, we saw those exposures happen at points. But now that they're more connected as a group, all of them are basically coming back, minus Draymond Jones, Rayshawn Jenkins. The majority of this team is back on defense. You're seeing that carryover from year 1 to year 2. The last question here for the state part of the Hawks, Mookie, I want to ask you is, if you had to give the Seahawks a first quarter of the season grade, what would it be and why?
Overall, I'll go with an overall. I'd say it's a B+. And what's preventing it from getting an A is the running game. If the running game was like top 10 or top 12, then I think there would be like an A performance. And frankly, if it was better, then they might have won the Niners game and they'd be 4-0. But the other thing to note, and this is kind of like a noisy stat, they've only had 1 game so far where they've scored a touchdown in the second half. So 49ers game, they got a touchdown the second quarter. They put up 3 points after halftime. The Saints game didn't get a touchdown the second half, but they were up by a jillion points, so it didn't matter. And then against the Cardinals, well, they had a touchdown, and then JSN got that holding call against him, and that changed it. But still, no touchdowns in the second half. So the Pittsburgh game is their best offensive performance because they got a touchdown in the first half, and then they got the rest in the second half. But, the running game, I think, still needs to be more consistent, or rather, they need to stop having so many negative plays. Not saying that they have to run for 150, but they're going to have to cut out the plays that put them in unfavorable down and distance. The defense, I think, is closer to an A than the offense. And it really just comes down to the pass rush has been good. Guys like Kobe Bryant have stepped up and made plays. Darian Kendrick way down on the bench from the waiver wire to getting 2 interceptions and probably should have more. The defense has, to me, lived up to the billing and maybe exceeded it in some. And they haven't given up more than 20 points yet. Now, at some point, they're going to play much better offenses than the ones that they've seen so far, maybe as soon as this weekend, but that comes with the acknowledgement Tampa Bay's missing so many guys. But still, I believe that the Seahawks defense is going to hold up as a top unit all season. The offense, I think, is still very much a work in progress, but I'm encouraged by what they're doing in the passing game in terms of increasing that play action rate, using under center straight drop back, which is a thing that they flatly refused to do with Grubb last year. And just the chemistry between Darnold and Smith and Jigba has been absolutely, it's borderline perfect what they've been able to do through 4 weeks. Now, getting Kupp involved more, and then, of course, seeing more of Arroyo and Barner, seeing more of the tight ends in the passing game, and especially as middle of the field options, I'd like to see. And there are still questions about this offensive line, though, because I don't think they were great against Arizona. And Tampa Bay's defensive front is still going to be pretty tough. Houston's is going to be even tougher in a couple of weeks. So, ignore Houston's offense. That defense is still legit. So those would be tests for this offensive line. But I will go with B+ overall. And there is, of course, still, like I said, there's still room to get an A or an A+ that would put him over the top as, to me, Super Bowl caliber contenders, or at least playoff contenders.
Yeah, I'm there with you on the B+. I think, I want to see this offense be a little bit more consistent in certain areas where, to your point, scoring touchdowns in the second half of games and being able to close out games. We talk about the defense being able to close out games. The offense should be able to close out games in the second half realistically, right? So, those are, basically outside the Steelers game, they haven't really done that in any aspect. They didn't need to against the Saints, and they're probably going to need to versus this Buccaneers team. If you don't, unless you blow them out like you did the Saints, you're not going to really be able to survive, I think, against Baker. And Chris Godwin's back and looked pretty good last week, and you got Mbuka and Cade Otton. Yes, they're missing some other guys, Bucky Irving and Mike Evans, but Rashid White's a good running back. You're going to have to be able to play with them in the second half of the game, and that's going to cause you to need to put up some points. Hopefully it's not just field goals, but I'm there with you on the B+, and it seemed like most of the people in the chat were with you there on the B+, Mookie. But let's kind of pivot here to, obviously, the injury and depth charts kind of came out today, or injury report and depth chart, which we can assume based off of that. So we now know Julian Love isn't playing. We now know Devin Witherspoon isn't playing again. Both are missing their second games with the same injuries they had prior to the Arizona game. We also know Josh Jones is out again, which I kind of expected, because when him and Oots got hurt, it sounded like they both had pretty significant ankle injuries, and Oots ended up on the IR with his. And then the last one is obviously DeMarcus Lawrence isn't playing with a thigh contusion injury that he got, which, yes, I don't like the fact he's not playing, because I think he would have had a pretty significant, role in this game. But Chenna coming back kind of lessens that blow. We know also from Mike Macdonald that Ty Okada is going to be starting for Julian Love in that secondary, and Nick Eamon-Warry's back. Here's my question. Who do you think out of these three players is going to have a bigger impact? Kendrick, Jobe, or Eamon-Warry come Sunday?
That's a tough one, because we're still to be determined on Eamon-Warry. He hardly played in preseason, and he played 4 snaps in the Niners game and then got hurt. So you're going to have to assume that they're going to play him significantly on Sunday. He's been a full practice participant since even the day before the Cardinals game. So I almost want to say Joe, because he might draw the Ibuka assignment primarily. And Emeka Ibuka is looking like he's looking like a future superstar. He's looking like yet another Ohio State receiver who can succeed in this league right away, as was the case with JSN. But I think that Eamon-Warry might have the biggest impact if he is what I think he is. Now, doesn't always mean a positive impact. I think that there are going to be some rookie moments for him, but just by the number of snaps I expect him to have, I believe that he'll be one of the stories of the game. And he's going to be probably down to the box, and he's going to be close to the line of scrimmage most of the time. That's what we saw in preseason. I don't anticipate him being a coverage safety very often. Be interesting to see if he gets any pseudo boundary corner snaps just with that frame of his. And if he does, then Griff Sturgeon is going to have the biggest grin on his face. But I think Eamon-Warry could have a game deciding say as far as his involvement. Whereas Kendrick, he's going to be in the slot. I don't think that they'll play him outside, because that's where he struggled, and that's where he's picked up a lot of penalties when he was with the Rams. But Jobe is certainly going to get tested quite a bit. I think that Eamon-Warry, though, because of what he can do, or what we expect him to do against the run in addition to the pass, I believe that's going to be the most intriguing aspect of Seattle's defense this week. It sucks to lose Spoon. It sucks to lose Love. And maybe in hindsight, they really weren't ready for last week. But Thursday night game means that things get a little tight. It's a risk that they took. But I'm excited to see Eamon-Warry. And I'm going to accept that he might make a mistake here and there. But I'm also going to anticipate he's going to make some splash plays, especially down to the line of scrimmage. And he could maybe limit Tampa's rushing attack that won't have Bucky Irving, but will still have Rashad White. I believe Sean Tucker would be the backup. So just be on the lookout for Nick.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Nick Eamon does. I'm excited to actually see Kendrick in the nickel again because we're going to have to see him there with Spoon being out. Woolen's going to get his opportunities again outside, and Jobe will be outside as your two primary guys. But I'm excited to see what Kendrick can do. I don't want to have another situation, though, Mookie, where they put so much in the defensive playbook like they did in week 1 for having Eamon there, and then, he ends up getting hurt, and now we're playing base the whole game. Like, they can't be in that situation. Like, yes, it's great we got him back, and to your point, but he hasn't played a lot. Yeah, have some good things in sub packages, but this defense is rolling. Kendrick's been playing well. You don't have to turn around and go, okay, we're putting Nick in there all the time. And if he gets hurt, now our defensive game plan's kind of gone out the window again. I think they need to hedge against that a little bit. What I'll say, though, and a question I've got here, Mookie, is out of this group of injuries that you've now seen, and we'll take Josh Jones out of this, what injury is the one that you think is the most impactful for Seattle?
I actually go with Love over Spoon. So Witherspoon, I don't think he was moving totally right. And apparently Love's injury happened late in the game, according to Mike Macdonald. And I haven't gone back to the alternative to see what happened. Maybe it was when he was trying to leap for that interception when he was covering Trey McBride, but I'd have to go back and check. But Spoon wasn't moving like at his usual pace. I mean, he got a half sack, but like the DeMarcado play, I think that's a play he would normally make. Got a little bit undisciplined looking for a crosser that was already covered. And then he's out of position and he can't recover in time. But what Julian Love does for this defense, he's like he's playing traffic cop. I mean, he controls everything back there. And to not have him, nothing against Ty Okada, but like Ty Okada being good against the Saints means very little to me compared to the potential for him to get picked on against a better offense with a better quarterback and better receivers in Tampa Bay. So this is going to be a big test for Ty Okada. Do wonder how much DeAnthony Bell will play because Eamon is back. Like, is there going to be less of a need to have him in nickel packages? But we'll see on that front. But yeah, not having Julian Love stinks because he's playing. I think he has the potential to be an all-pro safety this year. And now he's gone for a second game. And again, you could have gotten away with it against the Saints because they're a bad football team. Don't know about a team like Tampa Bay, as banged up as they are. They still have their starting quarterback. They got Godwin back, and they have Igbukah. So we'll find out pretty soon how this is going to play out against a better team, not having Julian Love. Because I think with the way that Jobe and Kendrick have played, and no, Rick Woolen is not going to be a random healthy scratch. So he's going to be playing. He's going to have a role in this defense for as long as he's still on the team. But they've played well enough for me to be a little bit more at ease in terms of the cornerback depth chart. And they can always just call up Shaq from the practice squad if they're worried. But the safety position is one where I'm really curious to see how those two perform. Eamon, of course, and then especially Ty Okada, because this is going to be a much tougher assignment for him than it is for playing against the Saints.
Yeah, and the one saving grace in this situation I'm happy about is when we saw Ty Okada have to step in week 1, and a lot of people were like, he was horrible. Why is he on the roster? He's not a box safety. That's not his role. He got thrown into what Nick Eamon role was, having to cover in those situations. And what did Kyle Shanahan do? Pick on him until George Kittle ended up out of the game. But what I'll say is Ty Okada playing a back, too high shell style where he is the free safety, I think will not limit his exposure, but make him more comfortable in the role he's playing and be able to play a little bit more confidently in that. Which, again, Mookie, I agree with you. Like, having Chris Godwin and Igbukah back, like, they're going to take shots. They're going to test him. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it. I agree. Julian Love is the bigger miss here than Spoon. And not that I don't love Spoon, but, I think we have enough pieces to kind of mitigate a Spoon absence than we do Julian Love consistently missing football games. That's the one thing I'll say on that topic. But, this is the other interesting thing. If you're in Mike Macdonald and John Schneider's shoes right now, with the injuries that you kind of starting to see pile up here, are you considering bringing in maybe another free agent at one of these positions to kind of help, reinsure the depth behind it, is what I'll say.
With the bye week 3 weeks away, as long as nobody is facing IR, and it doesn't sound like they are, although Macdonald is kind of he's being very coy. If you read the transcript of the press conference, let alone watch it, There might be some ambiguity and well, just a lot of room for vagueness on that front. But I think they're fine where they are right now in terms of just having any secondary help. And now, in hindsight, there might have been a reason why they randomly had 3 practice squad level safeties brought in for tryouts earlier this week. I figured the only reason that would happen is if something was going on in the active roster, and that's the case. So Jarek Reed is their only safety on the practice squad. So I wouldn't be shocked if Jarek ends up getting a call, maybe especially just to play special teams while Ty handles defensive assignments. But yeah, I don't think there's any need really to sign a free agent for a few weeks while these guys are out if they're short-term injuries. I will say on the defensive line, because we haven't touched on it a whole lot with Tank being out, potentially a bigger opportunity for, let's say, Mike Morris to play more. And he's looked good so far in his limited snaps. So maybe we get a little bit of Morris. Maybe Jared Ivey gets a few snaps. He certainly did against New Orleans. So just some things to watch out for, as opposed to Chenna assuming all of Tank's snaps. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to give some run to Mike Morris and or Jared Ivey this weekend.
Yeah, and I'd be really excited to see Jared Ivey get some more run and Mike Morris as well. I think Mike Morris, to your point, Mookie, he has played well in his limited snaps, and he's clearly the backup to DeMarcus, I think, in a lot of the sub packages. It'll be interesting to see him getting more of a opportunity to see what happens there in some of those. And I don't think they're ready necessarily to put Chenna back full 100% tilt. They're still easing him back into things, which is good. So it'll be interesting. But let's move on to our other topic here. And this is what I'm really interested to talk with you about, Mookie, is Macdonald and the coaching staff. So the first question I got is, now you're in year 2. How, in your opinion, has Mike Macdonald grown as a head coach compared to last season?
I think he's just being more assertive and hands-on with the whole team instead of just focusing on what was more comfortable in terms of the defense, because he admitted that last year when it was Ryan Grubb as the offense coordinator, he kind of just ceded control of the offense to Grubb. And once the Grubb thing didn't work out, it's like, all right, I want some more inputs on this OC search, want somebody who fits my vision. And then suddenly when Kubiak gets hired, sometimes he, at least through OTAs, he was ceding his defensive duties to Aden Dirty and focusing on the offense. So I think that part matters. And then also just bringing in familiar veteran names of the coaching staff, guys with actual NFL experience and not guys like Grubb and Huff. So people who've been around the league for a long time. So I think that has helped on both sides of the ball. Now, of course, not every veteran coach, longtime assistant is necessarily a good one. And Kubiak, I don't even think qualifies as a true veteran offensive coordinator. He's only done it for 3 seasons. But guys like Benton and Dennison, and already still having Leslie Frazier as your assistant head coach, I think that does matter quite a bit. And the operation, as a result, does feel smoother. I also think that Macdonald's showing a little bit more of his personality in these press conferences, and who knows what that means like for behind the scenes. But even just in the locker room footage, you can tell that there is a respect for Macdonald that has been gained pretty quickly, despite all the discourse about culture and whatever. It's going to be different than Pete, and there's no need for him to mimic Pete. He is trying to succeed in his own way. And I think so far he's done a good job on that front. And over these next several weeks, if they keep winning, I mean, I'm sure those locker room celebrations, those locker room post-game speeches are going to get wilder. Maybe we're going to see him. Maybe we're going to see him go berserk one of these days, like Pete's, and say he's freaking jacked up.
Either that, or he's going to run through a whiteboard like we heard Pete did before the the Seahawks Broncos game back when Geno took over as the starter. He kicked in a whiteboard or whatever it was. So, no, those are definitely some key things I've noticed. I think the one thing that's interesting now is what happened in the offseason with Mike. Having, he was basically on fast forward mode last year, having the ability to go to Senior Bowl, having the ability to dive into the free agent class, be a part of a lot more of these decisions that are being made in the franchise and the direction it's going, I think have allowed him to get more comfortable because it's more in his image than it was. I'm still dealing with taking over Pete Carroll's image of how the Seahawks were going to be. And I think it's allowed him to settle in. The other question I got is, which assistant coach to you has had the biggest early season impact this year?
might be Benton because the pass blocking for the most part has been better than the run blocking. And look, if you gave me the choice of do you want a better pass blocking unit than run blocking unit? Sorry, folks, still a passing league. And Darnold would not have the season he's having if the pass blocking was wildly inept like it has been for years now. So Gray's Abel, I think, has only allowed one pressure. Charles Cross has been good as usual. Sundell has struggled at times, but I think he's actually struggled more in run blocking than pass blocking. Bradford, he is who he is at this point, I think. I mean, he's had some good moments, but like a lot of these pass pro busts seem to involve him at some degree. Lucas, I don't think has been at his best through the first few weeks, but as a whole, I think you could say that Darnold has done a great job getting the ball out in time. But are you seeing those other than in some of these pass pro busts, when their assignments sound, are you seeing them instantly lose their matchup? Certainly not as often as we've seen in years past. So I think that they are looking better coordinated in terms of their blocking assignments. They're communicating better, and they're having to deal with a lot of blitzes. Darnold has been one of the most blitz quarterbacks in the league so far, either the first or second most. And Darnold is shredding the blitz so far. But the offensive line, in addition to Zach Charbonnet as a pass protecting back, they're doing their job pretty well. Darnold is still at like a 5% sack rate or something like that without me looking it up. And that's like Matt Hasselbeck territory when he had Walton Hutch. So if that can hold up, and I don't think it will, I think there's going to be some normalization. But as long as we're not in like Russ territory where it's 8% and above, I think that is a huge improvement from what we've been used to seeing. And again, Darnold helps by getting the ball out in time and in rhythm. But this offensive line isn't just like they're not five saloon doors like right this way. They are, for the most part, holding their ground. And they've had some tough assignments early on, and they're going to have tough assignments in the weeks to come, certainly this weekend on the interior dealing with Vita Vea. But I think that John Benton, just being somebody who's familiar with the Kubiak and Shanahan scheme, just marrying those two things together, I think that has been a big help. So I'd say it's Benton first and foremost, even over Kubiak and some of the successes he's had as a play caller.
So I was going to take coordinators out of the equation, so Kubiak wouldn't count. And I was going to pick Jay Harbaugh because I think they've had such a good, but I'm going to take him out. So coordinators don't count. So Mookie, I'm glad you went with John Benton. The one I'm actually going to point to is on the defensive side, and I think it's Carl Scott.
Yeah.
With the secondary now that you're seeing with guys like D'Anthony Bell and Kendrick and Josh Jobe, Nehemiah Prichett, even in preseason, looked vastly improved from where he was last year. And, you're seeing guys like, Ty Okada even being a functional depth safety player. And we're going to get to see what he's been able to work with Nick Eamon-Warion. But I think Carl Scott deserves a lot of praise for how he's been able to build this secondary and take guys that are just showing up that are undrafted or we get off waiver claims and turn them into starting caliber defensive backs in the NFL, and Kendrick and Jobe. Like, that's not something that's just like, oh yeah, everybody can do that. Like, we see so many teams pick up DBs, drop them 2 weeks later because they just couldn't pick up the scheme fast enough. It's a credit to the players, but it's also a credit, I think, to the coaching. So for me, I would say I think Carl Scott's had a massive impact early on in that, team this year as an assistant coach.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if he's getting defensive coordinator looks this offseason. And don't forget, of all the staff turnover, I believe he's the only Pete holdover. So the fact that
and Nico Thorpe, I think, are the only two.
Yeah, so basically of the main assist, because Nico Thorpe is kind of like lower end quality, something like that. But as far as like upper level, near the top of the food chain type of assistant coaches, Scott has hung around, and I think his success is certainly tangible. So it was probably telling that he even was the one to survive out of the coaching staff of the final Carroll team. So I think that's a good shout to have Carl Scott in there, given how well the secondary has played. Even, we're going to talk about Reek to death at this point, but I think it's more of the guys on the lower end of the depth chart that have really taken a step in the absence of guys like Love and Witherspoon who haven't been around.
So the last question here on this coaching staff, Mookie, I think is going to be an interesting one, is what have you noticed about in-game management situations from the Mike Macdonald era currently to the Pete Carroll era? What differences have you noticed massively?
I'm seeing fewer wasted timeouts for no reason. Like they're not having constant trouble getting the playoff in time. Although that, in hindsight, a lot of that might also be rust too. But it certainly Pete has had that issue even with the Raiders thus far. I'm not thrilled with some of Macdonald's fourth down decisions. And in fact, in the early stages, would you believe that Carroll has been far more aggressive going for it on fourth down than Macdonald has? In fact, Carroll went for it in the Bears game on 4th and 1 at his own 35 in the first quarter. When has Pete Carroll ever done that in 14 years in Seattle? And naturally, Genty lost 5 yards and fumbled the ball. They turned it over. So Pete might not do that ever again. But with Macdonald, I think his fourth down decision-making has been inconsistent at best. I know that he seems to ascribe to a mixture of using analytics, but also just the feel of the game or feel for the flow of the game. But I do feel that sometimes, certainly in this Arizona game, there has been a tendency to be a little bit more conservative in the fourth quarter. And I'm wondering how much of that is Kubiak and how much of that is Macdonald getting in his ear, like, we don't want any negative plays here. We don't want to take a sack. Because I remember this was a Corbin Smith feature last year, the downfall of Grubb. So when they're in field goal range against Minnesota, they get into field goal range. They don't want to take any sacks, but instead of running the ball, they call a long developing pass play. Geno takes a sack, and then they end up kicking a 60-yarder that's short. So I believe that for Macdonald, that's where he wants to be erring on the side of caution. So that's just kind of what I'm feeling about Macdonald compared to Pete so far. But again, it's just his second year. He's only coached 20 games. We'll see how it evolves over time, because Pete was fairly aggressive at the time as a fourth down guy those first couple of years. But as he progressed, he got more conservative. So we'll see what happens with Mike.
All right, we're going to do one more segment here, Mookie, and then we're going to take a small little bit of a Q&A segment in between before we finish out the rest of the show. So the next topic on the docket is Sam Darnold and the offense. So obviously, big changes this year. We went to Sam Darnold, the Klint Kubiak, this whole thing. We've seen a 4-game, I should say, not 4-season, but 4-game sample so far of this. What do you think of Klint Kubiak and how he's been able to actually balance run and pass so far this year?
I think he would like to run more effectively for sure, and run more in certain spots where they've kind of been forced to throw. But in terms of the overall offense, I think it's been good, not great. I think what's been great is the fact that they've maintained explosive passing plays. It's been predominantly JSN, but they've hit explosive passing plays to Horton already. They've hit one to a couple to Elijah Arroyo. They hit one to A.J. Barner. Cooper Kupp hasn't really had many, but for Darnold to have as few pass attempts as he's had, exactly 100 through 4 weeks, and they're killing it as far as explosive play rate, that's massive. Because remember, the concern this offseason is, okay, DK's gone, Tyler's gone. Now you've cut MVS. Like, who is going to be the explosive play option? Well, JSN is obviously that. And you can scheme up explosive plays in other ways for other receivers. So on that front, I'd say I'm very impressed with what Kubiak has done. The one caveat I'll have with the offense as a whole is that they have had the second most time in the NFL playing with the lead. I still kind of want to know what happens when they're playing from behind for a good chunk of the game, which is going to happen. Ideally, it doesn't, but it's going to happen because it's the NFL. So I want to see what counters Kubiak has when he doesn't have an advantageous game script, because it is a continuation of what Darnold experienced last year, where he was playing with the lead an overwhelming majority of the time. As Seahawks fans, we love it that for once they're not constantly playing from behind, because that felt like it throughout the Geno era. But in terms of the pass-run balance, I think they're generally satisfied with the balance so far. I do wonder about tells. So, for example, Kenneth Walker's only had 8 third-down snaps this year. Not a single one of them has been in pass pro. I don't think Walker's some atrocious pass-protecting back, but if it's third down and he's not in the game, then I'm willing to bet that Charbonnet is in there for pass protecting out of the gut. So as far as using Walker more, I think they can still use Walker more on late downs. So there is going to be an interesting split as far as how they use Walker and how they use Charbonnet. I hope they haven't like pigeonholed them into defined roles already. But yeah, the running game I think will get better. I'm not saying it's going to be elite, but there's still a lot to work on in terms of just the cutback lanes, in terms of getting out in space on the outside zone runs. That is just not clicking at the moment. And I would not be surprised if at some point especially if Sundell continues to have these shaky moments, if they consider going to Oluwatimi at center. I don't think that they're going to bench Bradford unless he's like ungodly bad. But that's the one area where you notice Macdonald wasn't super committed to saying Sundell's the full-time starter, right? So that's just one thing to consider. And I know Oots is getting a lot of a lot of love in the comments, but over these next few weeks, I am curious to see how much I formation they use and how much Brady Russell they use. And really just anybody who's playing auxiliary fullback. Like they had Derek Young and Jake Bobo play fullback snaps, I think, or at least definitely Bobo. I don't know. I don't remember about Derek, but I wonder how much of Oots' absence does affect the running game to any extent. Even though running behind Oots hasn't been terribly effective on a per snap basis, I do feel like having Oots in itself is something that they really want more consistently. I think a way to mitigate that is start having Barnard do some like H-back stuff. Haven't really seen that happen. Or Saubert if they don't want to use one of their top 2 tight ends. But there are ways to get around Oots being gone for these next few weeks.
Yeah, I know it'll be interesting to see how because I think they're trying to get more of a consistent mix. And the thing that you pointed out about, Ken Walker never being in pass pro is a tell for sure, I think, for defenses that have started to figure some of this out. The Sundell Olu conversation is an interesting one. Like I've been someone that's been really high on Sundell and think he has the ability to be a long-term starter in the NFL, but definitely you're seeing some of his struggles right now. And I don't know if that's because Bradford, is not a great necessarily guard beside him. And to your point, Mookie, he is what he is. And maybe they eventually do upgrade that. And again, if you can have it where your center is probably your weakest blocker on your offense, but you're surrounding him with good tackle, good guard play, and he's average, he may stand out more than if you've got an elite center and subpar guard play. It can make that a little bit challenging. I think there's a conversation to be had, Mookie. You're right about whether or not they switch to Olu at some point if it doesn't start going in the right direction. And I think a big determining factor will be this weekend versus Vita Vea and Greg Gaines. If Sundell is getting blown off the ball or can't anchor, and Vita Vea and Greg Gaines start having their way in the interior of that offensive line, that's going to be a massive problem. And I think all of a sudden that conversation may start happening about, okay, do we go to Olu? Because Olu can at least anchor. We've seen that in the past. He can do that. He may not be as fleet of foot to get out in certain areas in the zone, but I think you can mitigate that in some aspect or form with different target points in your run game and such. The other question I got for you here, Mookie, on this is, has Sam Darnold showed you enough in these first 4 games to convince you he can be more than just another bridge quarterback in Seattle?
Think I'll wait for after the bye, because after the bye is like the real stretch run. I don't think Washington's going to be great this year, just for the fact that the injuries they suffered. And I don't know if any of you watched the Washington-Atlanta game. That defense is ungodly slow. And I hate to say it, but I was watching SportsCenter the other day, which I tend not to do, but it just happened to be on. And Dan Orlovsky, that might be the first time I've actually heard any national analyst kind of admit that with Bobby Wagner, they're picking on him so badly, especially when he's in man coverage. Like Bobby can still do a lot of downhill stuff and easier assignments, but Washington, I think in general, is going to be in for a regression that I guess I should have seen coming, but I was hoping wouldn't happen. But you got Washington. You still got important division games. Now with the Rams, of course, twice that back end of the year. And the Colts and Falcons, I think, are going to be tough games. So I think that the second half of the season will be a greater determining factor as far as, is Darnold a guy who will be here for more than just the current contract? 4-game sample size is not enough for me, especially since this wasn't a murderer's row they were facing. I mean, San Francisco and Pittsburgh are admittedly, one's 4-1 somehow, and Pittsburgh is 3-1. But I think Pittsburgh for the most part is just the same team they've always been, or they've been recently, which is they're probably going to win 10 games. They might even win the division with Baltimore falling apart, but reality might set in when the wild card round happens, and then I think Arizona is going to be just another middling team, and the Saints are the Saints. So when we get down to the nitty gritty and there are more high stakes games on the horizon for Sam, if he delivers in those, then I think it is more than reasonable to think that he could be a guy who's here for the long term. And he could be, I don't want to say another Geno, I'd say another Hasselbeck, because Hasselbeck got traded here, but I've been making the Darnold Hasselbeck comparisons, and you have to as well. That Hasselbeck was already he was in his early 20s. when he got here, but he was also like 27, 28 years old the year that they made the Super Bowl. So that is kind of what I'm leaning toward, where if Darnold can have a Hasselbeck-like career, you can win with that. And, honestly, Hasselbeck plus, because he's got better physical tools than Matt ever did. So I think that Darnold, I'm leaning toward him actually having the ability to sustain this. But I will need to see more games than just the early portion of the season, because we have had times where it doesn't have to be this team. Quarterbacks look amazing the first few weeks of the season, and then the adjustments set in, and then things change, and then suddenly that regression hits hard. And that's even how some fans felt with Geno in 2022, where he was just tearing it up the first half of the year. He's throwing 2 touchdowns every week, wasn't throwing a bunch of picks, and then the back end of the season happened, and that kind of was the starting point as far as, is Geno really the super long-term answer? Darnold is different because he's younger than Geno, but I think the point still remains that you're going to have to go a few more weeks than that to have a definitive statement on Darnold being the franchise quarterback.
I am in agreement with you, but what I'll say is I'm leaning more to him being the franchise guy than I'm leaning to him being the bridge guy currently. And the reason I say that, there's certain things in his play when I break down and watch his film where I go, he's proving he can do this consistently now. And I completely agree with you, Mookie. The gauntlet is still yet to come in some of the games. Like when he plays the Rams, what does that look like? When he plays some of these tougher teams, what does Sam Darnold look like? And I think this will be a good test, because the one thing this Buccaneers team is going to do, they are going to bring pressure up the gut, and it's going to disrupt that pocket. And is Sam going to be able to make some of those throws and stand in there constantly throughout this game and take some of those licks, or is it going to cause him to speed up his clock a little bit and miss some opportunities because he gets a little jumpy? So those are going to be some things we're going to have to see, but I am leaning more to he is likely to be the franchise franchise quarterback for probably 6 seasons. Then I would say he's going to be washed out and gone and be a bridge to Jalen Milroe right away. That's just where I am, but I agree. I'm in the same boat. I want to see after the bye as well. I want to see that Commanders game coming out. I want to see, the Minnesota game and some of these other teams that we're going to play down the stretch, and the Rams game, to see where he's at in that situation. The other thing about this offense is, outside of JSN, and I feel this will be an interesting question to hear your response, who on the offensive side has exceeded your expectations outside of JSN?
Zabel. I think that Zabel, and I don't think last week was his best game. In fact, to me, it was definitively his worst, but he played well in the other 3 games. I figured that offensive linemen, especially even if they're drafted in the first round, are going to have some lumps. I don't think Zabel's committed a penalty yet, which is not an insignificant thing, given the tendency for rookies to false start, maybe have like some sort of mistiming on the snap, and they're late out of their stance just as much as they're early. I think that Zabel has done quite well in terms of just, and it certainly helps that Charles Cross is next to him. But I believe that Zabel has exceeded my early expectations. I thought that he would have some tough games, but so far that hasn't really materialized yet. I'm sure it'll happen, and he's going to be involved to some degree dealing with Gaines and Villa this weekend. But you used to watch the highlights that Brian Baldinger's putting out of Gray Zabel, and he just loves it, and he can't get enough of him. And when you see the touchdown that Ken scored in the Pittsburgh game, the dagger, and you see Zabel 15 yards down the field looking for somebody to block on what to me was not an intent to score play on 3rd and goal from the 19, and it ended up in a touchdown. That's where you go, all right, this is exactly why the Seahawks took him in the first round. So I'm going with Zabel. That might surprise some people, because the easy bits would just be for me to say Torrey Horton, for example, even with 6 catches. But I think that it's really just been it's been Zabel to me, and that's the most important part to me, even over the skill position players. Because if Zabel was an instant liability out there, they're not going to do much. They're just going to have him play through it. But so far, he's been a net positive.
Yeah, I can't say anybody else. Like Royal, we haven't seen enough of. In my opinion, we haven't seen yet enough of Torrey Horton offensively, outside of his 1 touchdown grab really in the Pittsburgh game. We saw the big punt return, but he hasn't gotten really involved yet completely in the passing game yet for me to say like he's part of it. So I'm gonna lean in there with you too and go Gray Zabel's been, really good. Mookie, how lovely would it have been to have Gray Zabel and Tate Ratledge on opposite guard spots?
Yeah, because Ratledge is playing well in Detroit right now. Because
he is.
After all the I think sort of justified panic in week 1 with the way they looked against Green Bay. Destroyed Baltimore's defense. Cleveland actually gave them a bit of a game, and Flacco just kept giving the ball away. But still, they were able to move the Cleveland defensive line a bit at times. And then they put up 50-something on Chicago. And Tate Ratledge has been at the heart of that. So when you lose Ragnow, you lose Zeitler. It's a changed offensive line, and Ratledge just slotted in very well. And, of course, you and I were like, Donovan Jackson would be great for the Seahawks because of his tackle guard versatility. But I'm less worried about that now because Cross is on the 5th-year option, likely to be extended. So with Zabel, you just hope that, man, yeah, it really would have been something to have Zabel and Ratledge together. But just having Zabel, having some potential stability on this offensive line, I can't stress how important that is because, in theory, for next season, you should have your left tackle, left guard, and right tackle all secured. And then only center and right guard are question marks, seemingly all the time. But still, you'd rather that than having to make wholesale changes like they've seemingly been trying to do every year.
Yeah, and that's the way I think. I think, in my opinion, for the Seahawks going into the draft next year, and we'll cut the draft talk after this, I think right guard and edge rusher are their main 2 top priorities at this point. With following in behind that, finding more linebacker depth or another linebacker to play with Ernest Jones and maybe another corner. That's kind of the priority list I have already started to set out when I've got my whiteboard here in my office going over, okay, what are the priorities for the Seahawks in the 2026 draft? But let's take some questions here, Mookie, and comments, because we've been talking for a long time, but this chat, there's 510 people in here, and they've been going off throughout the entirety of the show, and I greatly appreciate everybody in here, and there's a bunch of donations, which is awesome. So first one, Dan Viens, thank you, Dan, for the $20 donation. He goes, the Bucs have been really good versus the run this year, and with Villa and Gaines anchoring the middle, how can the Seahawks take a step forward in their run game given that tough matchup? In my opinion, I think the one thing they're going to have to maybe use in this game that they haven't used a lot of is jet sweeps. Get them going laterally to then open up. And that's where I feel like Torrey Horton should have some impact in that role. I would be getting him and, JSN involved in that jet sweep game to an extent. Even Cooper Kupp, we've seen do it in the past. But get them going laterally. Get that quick handoff. Then you can come off that fake jet. Then you can get to your zone. And it makes them hold a second. They can't just fire and hope that they're going straight forward. If you keep running the zone stuff, yes, it goes laterally to an extent, but it allows Vita Vea and them to get a push. If you run a quick jet and the guy can just get out around the edge quickly, it limits the impact, in my opinion, of that interior pressure that's going to potentially come from the Buccaneers defensive line.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth as far as the jet sweeps. Now, we actually saw JSN get a couple of carries, and these were not sweeps. They were like toss plays as he's motioning in the backfield. Rather not see that happen too often. I think that he's better as a jet sweep guy. We know that Kupp was killing Seattle with that over the years and other teams. So you have 3 options. You got JSN, you got Kupp, you got Horton. I still think you can even use the running backs in jet motion. Like I remember one of the first big plays Kenneth Walker had was the Falcons game in 2022. Yeah, it was Walker, wasn't Penny. And they gave him a handoff on a jet, and he was able to make people miss and turn it into a 20-something yard gain. So you can even have like 2 backs in the backfield or 2 backs in the formation and have Charbonnet next to Darnold and maybe Walker motions across. Like there are ways to mitigate the inevitable bullying that Vea and Gaines are probably going to do. But if there was ever a game for Seattle to also get their pitch game working, their outside tosses, it's probably this one. I think you're going to have to be realistic about what damage you can do on the inside. Yeah. I don't know how much they can maybe try and trap block or
counters, stuff like that.
But I think that they're going to have to try and win on the outside. This Buccaneers run defense is, I believe, number 1 by DVOA. Saquon Barkley was pretty much a non-factor. And we talk about creative plays. The touchdown Saquon scored, if you watch the Eagles-Bucs game, they fake pushed it and then pitched it to Barkley. And then there's nobody in because they're all expecting them to go inside. Seattle really can't do that unless they're in short yardage. But they're going to have to get a little bit creative as far as running away from Vea and Gaines in the middle. That doesn't mean do it the whole game. Like they're going to have to at least try. But realistically, I think their success is going to have to come outside the tackles.
Agreed. Alana here comes in with, I'm afraid without Julian and his leadership in the backfield, they might get gashed. I don't know if they'll get gashed. I think there's a higher chance of them giving up an explosive play here and there, but it'll be interesting to see how Tayakata simulates, to Mookie's point, in that secondary, and what role Kobe Bryant holds in that secondary with Julian Love being out, because he'll have to probably be the communicator, I would assume, back there.
Yeah, definitely. So will they get gashed? I don't think so. I think there's going to be a pretty low scoring game, just to kind of give away how I think this game will end. But I would feel differently if Tampa Bay had all their guys around. So if they had Bucky Irving and they had who are the guys on injury reserve? Godeke and
McMillan.
Mouch. So Godeke and Mouch. So those are the two offensive linemen. And then Evans is out.
So is Jalen McMillan's out.
Yeah, McMillan's still out because of the neck injury. The hospital, Teddy Bridgewater hospital balled him into a neck injury. So this is not Tampa Bay at its fullest. And even throughout the season, Tampa Bay's offense hasn't been lighting it up. It has been tough for them because of the offensive line injuries. And Wirfs only just got back, and he's their best lineman by far. He's one of the best in the league. But they're kind of having to grind their way. They had to grind their way through the first 3 games. They had to come back in all of them in the final minutes. And they couldn't do it a 4th time against Philadelphia. They were down 24-6 at one point, and most of their offense in that game came on 2 plays: a 70-something yard touchdown to Ibuka, and then a scramble drill 72-yard touchdown to Bucky Irving. So this Bucs offense is not the same so far than what we saw with Liam Cohen last year, where they were healthy up until Godwin broke his ankle, and Evans missed a few games with the hamstring injury, but they were killing it in play action. That is one thing to note. Just jumping ahead to the preview. Tampa Bay's play action rate has been very low, and it's also not been very effective compared to last year. So I think that also helps Okada if they're not going to do a lot of play action stuff, and he's not having to really guess in terms of should I come down or should I stay in coverage, that sort of deal.
Amy says Jay can stay another week. There's our regular weekly check-in with Amy on whether Jay Harbaugh gets to stay another week in Seattle as special teams coordinator. Johnny comes in. Will Reek step up on Sunday? I think Reek will be sound on Sunday.
Yeah, just no penalties, no sloppy penalties. You might get a BS flag, and I'm not going to be mad if that happens, but no undisciplined penalties. Like the second PI that he got, watching it again, I think that's very almost like a reputation kind of DPI.
Yeah.
The first one is just bad. Like he gets beat off the line of scrimmage by Michael Wilson, and he just panic grabs. And I think there's safety help over the top, so he didn't need to. But even without that, like you supposedly have 4.2 speed, you should be able to not just panic your way into committing a penalty like that. But just keep the penalties and the mistakes to a minimum. And I think he's going to be able to be good in his coverage assignments. I think he's going to step up. I mean, everything this week has been kind of like Reek-centric, whether it's the report from Ian Rappaport or Dirty and Macdonald both having to answer questions about Reek. I feel like there's a big pressure on him, a big spotlight on him. And if there was ever a time for him to deliver, it's this weekend and against a very good team.
Agreed. All right. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Comes in with, talking with Johnny there. So apparently Reek has changed his name back to Tyreek. And so I'd rather fly an X-Wing. I hope that his gameplay matches and he goes back to his rookie season for him. I didn't know he changed his name back.
Was that fake or is it a thing that he did? Because I saw on social media that he never really changed his name. I think he's always been Tariq Woolen on social media. So,
well, if he did change it back, hopefully. Amy comes in with a really good point. She goes, Mike Macdonald did call out Peely for making a difference with the limited snaps. I think Peely needs to come up to the active 53, in my opinion. Like, at this point, I don't think Jonathan Hankins is playing it down for the Seattle Seahawks this year.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like, if Hankins isn't going to come off IR or whatever injured list he's on right now, then just sign Peely, and then we'll kind of work out what happens with Riley Mills later on in the season. But Riley's not a true nose. So if they're going to have a nose on the roster, a true nose, so not playing Murphy there, I think that Peely would be the option. And obviously he's preferred to Bohanna because he's got one more elevation than Bohanna. So I believe that's maybe not this weekend. I believe he'll eventually get signed to the 53. It really is just a juggling act with this roster. And once the secondary gets a little healthier, we might see some more moves made on the defensive line in terms of just shuffling things there.
Agreed. Alana back in. I want to see more bootleg passes to the tight ends in the flat. Yes, 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 and yes. It is one thing that is my biggest gripe right now is we're not running enough of these bootlegs with a backside tight end, either running an under or a flat underneath, or, even the play side to the boot, chipping and backing out in the flat that John Carlson used to do so well in Seattle. They need to implement that more into this offense. I think it's something that's currently missing in this passing game.
Yeah, they need to do it more often, especially the way that Darnold's performing, throwing on the run. And I think they're going to have to get him out of the pocket more because Tampa Bay is going to blitz a lot. I mean, when it's bowls, you're going to expect blitzes. But I think that they're going to find – and even if they have to roll him out and move the pocket and gun, totally makes sense. But, yeah, I do want to see more of the tight ends at the flat because it's kind of like easy offense. Mm-hmm. And it's an easier offense if they're going to send more guys as rushers than will be available in coverage. So, yeah, more Barner, more Arroyo. And that's totally fine with me. I think it's the best way forward.
Robert in here with a super chat. Appreciate you, Robert. Goes, sup, Mookie and Bryce. I think if we limit explosive plays and get pressure on Baker, we'll be fine. I agree. If Baker's knees bothering him, you can get Baker and bring pressure without blitzing him. That's one thing that Baker Mayfield, through his entirety of his career, the games he has struggled the most in is when you bring pressure, but it's simulated pressure or different guys coming, but you're not actually blitzing. You're still bringing 4-man and just dropping different guys. That's when Baker Mayfield struggles the most. And fortunate for us, Mike Macdonald is one of the best coaches in the NFL at doing that. So hopefully that's cranked up in this game plan this Sunday.
Oh, 100%. I'm hoping that they can limit the explosive plays, especially because Rachaad White is not as – he's a decent back, but I don't think he's as versatile as Bucky Irving. It's more like limiting Ibuka, limiting Godwin, limiting Kate Otten. So just keeping an eye – I think more limiting the explosive plays in the passing game. And that's going to be a real challenge because Mayfield is one to challenge coverage a lot. Somehow he's only thrown one interception. He could easily throw more. And that's the thing with gunslinger-type quarterbacks. Mayfield threw 17 picks last year. Nobody cared because he threw 41 touchdowns. So you're going to get that from Baker for better or worse. And that's what makes him an entertaining quarterback. But I 100% believe that, limiting the explosives is just going to be massive.
Amy back in with Mike Macdonald did mention Mike Morris in his presser today. So Mike Morris definitely is doing the right thing if he's getting mentioned in the pressers. John McGrath, can't wait for Mills to join the group. Yeah, Riley Mills joining this group later on in the season, I think will maybe give it that extra push, especially on the interior. So those are definitely two key things. Mike Morris obviously being a factor and Riley Mills coming back are going to be big things. So Mookie, let's talk about the Buccaneers-Seahawks game. So what for you is the single biggest mismatch Seattle can exploit against the Bucs on Sunday?
I think this is going to be interesting because they are banged up in the secondary. They're not going to have Jamel Dean, not going to have, Morrison. So they're going to have Jacob Parrish, who I believe was kind of like a common mock draft target to Seattle. I think that's the secondary, Tampa Bay secondary, more of their corners against Seattle's receivers. And by receivers, I really mean JSN and Kupp, and I guess Horton too. I think that's a mismatch. Tampa Bay's offensive line against Seattle's defensive line, I think is also going to be significantly in Seattle's favor just because of who they're missing. But with the one acknowledgement that having Wirfs back changes the equation a bit because you've got an absolute rock there who can play it. He's an all-pro at either position, either left or right tackle. He's that good. But I believe that as good as Tampa Bay's defense has been, having as many injuries as they have in the secondary, a healthy Winfield notwithstanding, I think there are going to be opportunities for this passing game against inexperienced corners who've been, for the most part, outside of Parrish, they've been playing when they've had playing time. They played well. But I think this is going to be a much different matchup than Philadelphia and their, let's face it, very boring and extremely limited passing game right now. I think that Seattle is, the way they're playing right now, is well equipped to attack Tampa Bay's secondary effectively.
Yeah, for me, when I think of this mismatch that Seattle can exploit against the Bucs, Monster Mash. It's October. We're getting to Halloween soon here. For me, it's got to be, I think, either Cooper Kupp in the slot might be a massive matchup nightmare for this Buccaneers secondary. Because like you said, everyone's going to be focusing on JSM, but I think this is a game maybe Cooper Kupp actually leads the team in receiving yards.
That could be one of those games. And it would be cool for Kupp to get his first touchdown as a Seahawk in week 5 throwback and also get it at home. Somebody in the comments, K soon saying, talking about Bobo, more Bobo. I mean, he got one catch last week, but and it's one catch that the NFL Network, the NFL Twitter account, wrongly said was Cooper Kupp's. So but maybe Bobo was just poor man's Kupp. Who knows? Another thing I would point out as far as a mismatch, and I'm thinking outside the box here: Seattle special teams and Tampa Bay special teams.
Yeah,
Tampa Bay, McLaughlin's missed a few field goals. They have had a blocked field goal for a touchdown allowed in the Jets game. It almost cost them the win. And a block punt for a touchdown that's immediately started the game against Philadelphia. So they have had issues with special teams. In fact, I think they're 32nd in EPA on special teams. Seattle is first. So that special teams gap that's in Seattle's favor this time, I think could mean a whole lot in terms of just the little things, whether in punt coverage or on kickoffs. I think that there could be opportunities for Seattle special teams to show their stuff again.
Yeah, and I hope for this sake Dixon has a better game punting. He's kind of been hit 50-50 this year, in my opinion. I think he needs to do a little bit better job of, doing some of his more infamous punts, like his knuckle punt and stuff, for especially, to your point, Mookie, a unit that's struggling. Make it more difficult on them. Do some of those things. So that'll be interesting. What for you, which Tampa Bay injury hurts them the most in this matchup? Is it no Mike Evans? Is it no Bucky Irving? What injury hurts them the most?
I think not having Irving hurts them in the passing game because of what he does as a receiver, because he's a better route runner. I mean, he's really good on screen passes. He hasn't been an efficient runner. They haven't had a great running attack thus far this year. They had a great rushing attack last season. This year has been difficult because of the changes on the offensive line. But I still think not having Mike Evans means that's one less big body you got to worry about if you're Seattle. And especially for anybody who's not Rick Woolen, having kind of a clear size disadvantage, not having him means that you have a safety blanket. He doesn't drop passes historically. He is a great route runner. He might not be the fastest guy in the world, but he means so much to that Tampa Bay offense, especially when he's in conjunction with Godwin. So as great as Ibuka is, I think that not having Evans is going to mean a significant amount for Tampa Bay's offense. I'm much more focused on who Tampa Bay doesn't have on offense right now than Tampa Bay's defensive absences, I should say, because if Tampa Bay's offense is restricted, that I think lessens the blow as far as the people Seattle's missing on defense.
And the last thing I'll ask you in this kind of small little preview period here, Mookie, is what's your X factor player for Seattle who could decide the game?
This is interesting. So I think, I might go with one of the tight ends, whether it's Barner or Arroyo. I mean, they gave up a couple of touchdowns to Goddard last week, but these were like the most, they shouldn't qualify as passing touchdowns. It feels sickening to just kind of like throw a mini pitch to Goddard that's barely forward and call that a passing touchdown. But I think for Barner, at the very least, what he can do as a blocker and then what he can do as a receiver. I mean, we just saw him catch his first touchdown of the season last weekend, or last Thursday, I should say. I believe that we're going to see a breakout game from one of these two tight ends in the passing game. So either Barner hits it big or Arroyo builds upon last week's success, because if not for the Budda Baker pass interference penalty, he would have had 3 catches and a touchdown. And it would have been, 60-something yards? So I think they're ready to use Arroyo a little bit more as a receiving tight end. And just the fact that, no, Josh Sweat, not exactly a coverage edge rusher, not meant to be covering that far down the field. But the way that he used his body for that, to box a guy out, and Josh Sweat's a big body to box out, even if he's not meant to be covering him that far down the field, that's improvement to me. That's encouraging. So I think there are many ways to use Arroyo as a receiver that could flummox Tampa Bay. And I would say that the weak spot for them is going to be their linebackers. Like Servase Dennis, not great in coverage, has always been hooked early. a couple of times for blown coverage assignments. And then Levante David is a great linebacker, but much like Bobby, he's seen his better days. So I think exploiting Tampa Bay's linebackers is going to be huge for Seattle. And it starts to me with using the tight ends. And please, let's start seeing those seam passes to the tight ends. We haven't seen that yet. You and I saw it in training camp and thought, oh, yes, the seam passes to the tight end are back, baby. Hasn't happened yet. I believe it's going to happen this weekend.
So my X factor for deciding this game is going to be Cooper Kupp. And I know it seems kind of like a bit of a chintzy one to go with, but the reason I say that is, to your point, I think Cooper Kupp, they may run him on routes from his Ram days, like that over route he used to kill us with all the time. I think with David, to your point, and these linebackers are so bad in coverage, I think Cooper Kupp's just going to feast. And I think Cooper Kupp goes over 100 yards in this game. I really do. I think there's an opportunity for it. And I think they're going to be so hyper-focused on trying to take JSN away that they're going to forget that Cooper Kupp exists to an extent. And he's going to just start dicing them up. And Sam's going to turn to Cooper Kupp, and just feed him the ball. And we're going to see a kind of like a throwback game for Cooper Kupp to what he did in his 2021 season, I guess it would be. His Triple Crown year, maybe kind of a throwback game in the throwback jerseys, maybe.
Yeah, I remember it was he who had the big game in the playoffs against Tampa Bay that knocked him out of the postseason after the Rams blew that monster lead. Kupp had like a 70-something yard touchdown to start the game, and then the Buccaneers straight up forgot to cover him the last two possessions, or last two passes by Stafford, and that's what won him the game. Kupp saved the Rams season, you could argue, and their Super Bowl run. So it'd be cool for him to play the hits one last time. And the one thing that has been consistent is his ability to find the soft spot in the zone. So that's always going to be there for him. The minute he stops doing that is the minute that he's totally spent. But he knows how to find those vacancies in the zone coverage. And I think that Darnold has already developed a good chemistry with him there, just as much as he has with JSN, is that JSN is clearly a better option in man coverage too.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Mookie, we're going to do our 3 keys to a Seahawks victory, and I'm going to bring those up right after this. All right, 3 keys for the Seahawks victory this weekend. So key number 1 for me this weekend for a Seahawks victory, Mookie, they got to win on early downs. Seattle's offense has been the most effective when staying on schedule this year. If K9 is gaining positive yards with this running back group on first down, Sam Darnold has play action and quick game pass options to keep the drives alive. Those will help them stay on schedule, especially on first, second down. Like, don't get in third and longs, especially against this interior pass rush. And on defense, force Baker Mayfield and the Bucs to play in second and long situations. Take away the run game. Force Baker to have to deal with this pressure that we keep getting with 4 guys and having enough guys to sit back in coverage. It'll take away their rhythm. It'll expose the shaky offensive line. Controlling the early downs is my first key for the Seattle Seahawks this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, third down, they've been good so far on third down. I mean, not amazing, not top of the line stuff. But you don't want to play for third down. So if they can have more effective early down stuff, stay on schedule, as you said, going to be a better day for the offense than I'm anticipating, frankly. And on the flip side, of course, is limit Tampa Bay's early down success. Because, the one thing, I'm going to have to pull up their stats while we're recording this, but the Buccaneers were an amazing third down team last year.
Oh, yeah, they were really good.
That was a fantastic offense. It's just that Jaden Daniels got in the way. Otherwise, Tampa Bay might have made another playoff run. So I'm looking at their third down stats right now, and they are 22nd. So that is a significant drop from last year. So force them into third down, as opposed to last year where it felt like they could get a first down on any down. So force them into third down, force them into third and long, and that'll make Mayfield uncomfortable. I think Mayfield is a hell of an escape artist these days, but I think just generating more the opportunity to pin their ears back in terms of the pass rush, I think that they can get to Mayfield a couple of times and force some punts.
Exactly my point, exactly why that's my first key for the Seahawks in this game. Second key for me this game is protect the interior versus the Bucs D line. So this Bucs D line is built, and this defense in a lot of ways is built around that interior pressure that Greg Gaines and Vita Vea can bring and collapsing the pocket. Vita Vea is an engine. I think somebody put it in the group chat, and I think he is the definition of beefcake when you look at it in the dictionary, is Vita Vea, and he is a monster. In my opinion, he is a Hall of Fame level caliber player. This is going to test that interior like we talked about earlier, Sundell, Zabel, and Bradford this week with that A-gap pressure. They have to hold firm, and the one thing is give Darnold some clean lanes to step into throws at points, and allow K9 to find the cutback opportunities. That's the one thing that may present itself a little bit more in this game, is some of those cutback opportunities for K9 to hit. If the middle collapses, the drives will stall and the turnovers are going to become more likely. Winning the battle inside is a non-negotiable for the Seahawks this Sunday.
Yeah, because when you think about it, San Francisco, Bosa is the star. Mykal Williams is looking good so far as a rookie. You don't think of their defensive tackles right now, given how much turnover there's been, as the stars of their front. Then you look at Pittsburgh. Cameron Hayward is past his prime. And he is a great podcaster for SB Nation, so that's a shameless plug for the fact that his podcast is affiliated with Fox Media and SB Nation, but he's not going to be playing much longer. You get to the Saints, and the Saints, they got – I mean, there's just not a lot there. There's just not a lot of talent there. And then Cameron Jordan is their edge rusher, but, again, he's another one past his prime. And then Arizona, they were having a hard time with Calais Campbell, and at 38 years old. This is the first time all season where the interior is a lot more dangerous than the edge rushers. And even at the edge rusher, you still got, I almost said Shaquille Barrett, but that's not the case. Hassan Reddick there. And Hassan Reddick just bounces from team to team, but usually he finds a way to be productive. But the worry is undeniably dealing with Vea and Gaines on the inside, and especially Vea. So I'm wondering how many double teams we'll see. Now, if this was a previous offensive coordinator, it's one-on-one, everybody, and we would be watching Connor Williams or Oluwatimi get sent 25 yards back. They would get sent all the way blocked into the SeaTac terminal. But this time, I think we're going to see more of an effort to put extra bodies on Vea more than Gaines, but both of them.
Agreed, and that mental image you just gave me is Connor Williams snapping the ball over someone's head and just going, like you said, out the building, out the airlock, and you're going all the way down to SeaTac Airport, and Vita Vea is taking you there. Last one here for me, keys to the game, win the explosive play battles. We've had a couple people in the chat bring it up as well. Explosives often decide in these games, especially when you got evenly matched teams. But I look at JSN, K9, Torrey Horton. We talked about the tight ends. We have to get some chunk plays in this game. And defensively, we got to prevent Godwin and Mbuka from being exactly that for the Buccaneers. Getting behind on the secondary, creating yak opportunities, like we got to stop those from happening. If Seattle generates the more explosive plays than Tampa, they will not only control the momentum, but also the scoreboard, in my opinion. Yeah,
explosive plays mean a whole lot in today's NFL, or probably throughout the history of the NFL. But Seattle's done an excellent job with explosive plays in the passing game. Not so much the running game. They had some against Arizona, but it's been inconsistent in terms of explosive plays there. Tampa Bay, of course, as you said, they've got Ibuka, and Ibuka has hit like several explosive plays already. I think he's got, 4 touchdowns? And I'm pretty sure 3 of them are explosive plays. So he's got the juice, as they say. And it turns out, in hindsight, it was a very, very smart idea for them, even with Godwin, Evans, and McMillan, to draft another receiver in the first round. Because if they hadn't, they would be in real bad shape, given Godwin just came back and Evans is out and McMillan's out. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that the Buccaneers are not going to have a good day on the ground against Seattle's run defense. That's the one thing that has been consistent from game to game. Maybe a couple of iffy moments against Arizona last week, and then maybe a bad rep here and there against McCaffrey. But by and large, their run defense has been amazing. And that's one of the things that I believe has been a point of emphasis for Macdonald ever since the first half of the last season, where it got untenable and they had to change the linebackers and change a whole bunch of other things. So it really is limit the explosive plays in the passing game. In fact, I would really narrow it down. Win the explosive pass play battle. Like have more explosive pass plays on our side than Tampa Bay side. And I think they're capable of that. And certainly with the way Smith and Jig was playing, he can get a bunch of explosive plays by himself, just through all of his clutch plays. The only thing he hasn't really done is take a screen pass and go for 15, 20 yards. But hardly unique when it comes to Seahawks screen passes. But intermediate and deeper down the field, it's been poetry in motion.
All right, Mookie. So I'm going to get you to do this now. I'm going to do it as well. What is your score prediction for this game on Sunday?
I'm going to go with, I think this is going to be a close game. I'm going to go with Seattle 20, Tampa Bay 16. So my hint as far as that score is that Seattle's offense is not going to be crisp. Their passing offense is not going to be super sharp because of all the pressure that Tampa Bay is going to deal with, whether through their blitzes or just even if they rush for, you've got to deal with Vita Vea. Vita Vea is almost a one-man blitz in himself. Just the way that he can take over a game. But I have a hard time seeing Tampa Bay's offense having their way with Seattle, even with the injuries. They're too banged up, I think, to capitalize on Seattle being banged up. And you look at the way that they performed on offense, 23 against Atlanta, that's good, but 260 yards of offense. They had 20 against Houston and 29 against the Jets. And one of those touchdowns was a pick six by Jamel Dean, who's not playing. And then 25 against the Eagles. The 2 points came on a safety in garbage time. The Eagles deliberately did one. And they were down big throughout the game, and they were playing catch-up mode. So they're not a bad offense by any means. But I think that Seattle's defense is equipped to slow down Tampa Bay's offense, given the injuries on Tampa Bay's side. So if you can make them one-dimensional, make Mayfield throw a bunch, I think we're going to see some course correction on the fact that he's not turned the ball over a lot. And we're going to get some turnovers out of him. It will be really cool. Only two teams so far have not forced a fumble this season, Green Bay and Seattle. It's about time that gets fixed this year, or this weekend, of course.
All right, and my final score prediction here, Mookie, for this game, I've got Seattle winning 24-17. So I kind of in that same wheelhouse as you. I think Seattle's able to put up at least 24 points, but I don't think it's going to be a consistent 24. I think it's going to be something where maybe they score – maybe it's, 17-17 and Seattle scores a late touchdown towards the end of the game to seal it. I don't know. It'll be them up and then kind of the Bucs chasing in behind. Basically, Seattle's going to control this game by dictating the early downs, like we talked about. Seattle can follow through with those three keys. I don't see a reason why they can't win this football game, given how banged up Tampa Bay is, and Seattle, relatively in retrospect, is healthier. So that'll be, the interesting things. But Mookie, it's that time of the show for you as the guest to do the 2-minute drill. But we're going to add a caveat. No timeouts for you in this 2-minute drill. You already burned them earlier in the game. No timeouts. So we're going to get right into the 2-minute drill right after this. All right, Mookie. So 2-minute drill here. Question 1. Who is the Seahawks MVP on offense and who is the Seahawks MVP on defense through the first quarter of the season?
Offense, I'm going to go with Sam Darnold. And then defense, I still think it's Big Cat. It's Leonard Williams.
Okay. Which is the biggest test for this team? Closing games in the fourth quarter or starting fast in the first half?
Closing games in the fourth quarter. Defense has already had a couple of blown opportunities.
Okay. Rookie you're most excited about long-term?
Torrey Horton.
Question 4. Is Sam Darnold's play sustainable or will defenses catch up to him through the back half of the season?
I think most of his play is sustainable and that he is at the very least a good above average starting quarterback now.
Okay. Question 5. Buy or sell? JSN will finish top 5 in the NFC in receiving yards.
NFC. True. Buy it. I'm buying it.
Okay. Question 6. Who's the most underrated Seahawk right now?
Can't use a timeout here, but I think it might be Kobe Bryant.
Okay. Question 7. What's the one stat that tells the story of this team's season so far?
The time they spent with a lead, which is second most in the league. So they're not trailing. They're not having to play from behind like so many other Seahawks teams, they're grabbing the lead, and for the most part, they're holding it. And it makes life easier when you got a lead.
Okay. Question 8. If Seattle could trade for one thing today, what would you pick? O-line help, pass rusher, or cornerback depth?
Another pass rusher. I would like to say off-ball linebacker, but another pass rusher.
Okay. Question 9. More likely to break out the rest of the way this season, Torrey Horton or Elijah Arroyo?
Still think Horton.
Okay. Question 10. Give me one bold prediction for the next 2 weeks.
That Seattle is going to drop the Jacksonville. They're going to split these 2 games. Don't think they're going to go 2-0. I don't think they're going to go in 2, but they're going to go 1-1 exactly.
All right. And that's the 2-minute drill. So, Mookie, that's the 2-minute drill, man. I appreciate you doing it. And let's get back into talking with some of our viewers here that are here. We got about 621 watching the show right now. So we're doing pretty good on that aspect. And I appreciate every single one. And before we actually get into that, guys, the one thing I'm going to ask is roughly half of the people that watch the Hawks Eye are not subscribed up to it. So please subscribe to it. Doesn't cost you anything. Helps me out, helps get the show out to more people. Like the show if you can. And everyone that already has done that, I appreciate it so much. Getting so much closer to being at 1,100 subscribers, trying to get up to 2,000 before the end of the season. So appreciate everybody in here that's already subscribed to the channel and a part of this great community that's growing. So appreciate all of you. Mookie, let's take a look at what some more of the questions and comments we've gotten in here. So let's go in here. We got one from Corey. Congrats, Bryce, on your own channel. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that you're back over here, man. It's great to have you here. I think this is going to be a big game for the tight ends, especially Arroyo. I also look for Nick Eamon-Warry to have a big impact blitzing on the Tampa Bay right of their O-line. Go Hawks. Yeah, that right side of that O-line for Tampa Bay is probably where you're going to see a lot, I think, of Nick's pressures come this week if he does come off the edge.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. And yeah, I'm hoping, like I said earlier, it's a big game for the tight ends. Just because this franchise has been so bad with having long-term answers at tight end. And in an ideal world, we might even have 2 on the roster right now.
Yeah, that's very true. John Carlson and Elijah Arroyo. I'm going to refer to AJ Barner as John Carlson. It like sticks in my mind. Like him catching that wheel route against Arizona, it just brought so many flashbacks to me of it. But Corey, appreciate the donation, man, as always. And I'm glad you're over here watching the show. Let's go to our next one here, and that is Elena again. We really miss Robbie Oots, and we kind of talked about that already on the show. I think Oots is a factor in this run game, and the fact that we don't have him for some of this I formation stuff, I think it's really, really big right now for the Seahawks.
It's just one game, and they still rush for 150 something without him. But so let's see how this goes the next few weeks. But I'll tell you what, they're not going to use Brady Russell at the same rate that they use Robbie Oots. And I think that Russell is just too small to be a fullback. He's kind of like an everyman at this position. Yeah,
pretty much. He's basically the Swiss Army knife, the jack of all trades and excellent at none, essentially, is what usually the term is. Dogzilla in here. Always good to see you in the chat. Another great show, Bryce. Love Mookie being your guest this evening. Well, this is State of the Hawks. So every 2 weeks, Mookie will be on the show here talking with me. And Mookie always jumps on from time to time. It's great to have Mookie in on the show and his insight. So thanks for the donation, Dogzilla. Johnny comes in here. Ooh, this is a good one. Why don't they pass more to the running backs?
I don't think Walker does a lot of route running. Charbonnet, I think that he could be a better receiving back than Walker. And it's not like Walker's incapable. He had that cool touchdown last year against Atlanta, diving catch. He had that check down against Washington 2 years back that turned into a 60-something yard touchdown. But the thing is, most of the time when you're passing to running backs, it's not efficient. So maybe have them run some routes. Like, they're not Jahmyr Gibbs, but that doesn't mean they're incapable. Like, run some sort of angle route, something that can even happen in the middle field, something that gives them a running start. Because these screen passes that they tried early on in the season have gone exactly how you think.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't exactly gone anywhere, to be honest with you, which is just the disheartening part of it. It was Corey. If you look up beefcake in the dictionary, they have a picture of Vita Vea there.
Which is funny because we were a little short of Veal.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Case Soon comes in with, if I was Jody, I'd pay the coaches whatever it took to keep them. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing with this coaching staff. Like, I'd keep Dirty around as long as you can. Obviously, Klint Kubiak and his assistants he's brought in. Like, I want to see this collective coaching staff be here for at least 3 more seasons together as a group. That's what I want to see. Because I think that they keep that group together of coaches and they keep adding to this talent pool, there is a very good chance we could be talking about another Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl run.
I'd like to keep Carl Scott. I'm pretty sure that this offense is not going to be elite enough for Kubiak to suddenly draw head coaching consideration. And then defensively, because Macdonald is the brains of the operation, I don't know how many people would necessarily be like up for a promotion to a coordinator role. Dirty, I don't think is going to be a head coaching candidate or anything, and he's not going to take a lateral move. But I think these coaches are here to stay, although Jay Harbaugh remains on a week-to-week basis.
Yes, exactly. Corey back in. He goes, I think we can find a linebacker in free agency. I'm also not ready to give up on Knight. Yeah, Tyrese Knight's had a weird start to this season. Hopefully he can kind of get his bearings here and get rolling back to the player he was in the back half of last season.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'm wondering about the injury. I mean, again, genuine injury, but also an unspecified health issue. Those are two things to consider there. But also, just tangentially, if anybody watched the Rams 49ers game on Thursday, you go to the Rams comment section or just watch how the 49ers were killing them with 5 air yard throws over and over again. And they are still very bitter about Pooh Paul Jr. not making the roster because if you watch the Rams linebackers, they are slow. And if the Rams defensive front, if Verse and those dudes can't get home, there are too many liabilities in the back 7, I think, for them to be considered this super special defense.
I thought the exact same thing last night watching that game as well, Mookie. Ian Victor, one of our great moderators here with Amy Holmes, but goes, now I got homework to do with scouting edge players and right guard, corner as well, safety due to Kobe's future in question and Love's injury issues. I don't think you can throw Love's injury issues in there yet, Ian. It's a hamstring. There's soft tissue. Otherwise, Love's been pretty durable since his time here in Seattle. But the Kobe future one is definitely interesting on what's going on with Kobe Bryant and whether or not he gets an extension.
Yeah, because the way he's playing, he might be in for more money than Seattle be willing to pay because they had apparently tried to extend him in the offseason and then talks fell apart. So I'd be curious to see what happens. Like, Kobe is a good player and has developed into one now that he's got his role, but he's not so unbelievably indispensable that I would be outraged if he walked. So it is just something to consider, especially when you've already drafted Eamon Wari, and he's not a direct replacement for Kobe, but the fact that even drafted a safety that high tells you some of what they have planned. But it seems like there's seemingly always a healthy safety market in the NFL draft, and so I'm not too worried there. But yeah, we've got time to scout later on in the year. I'm too worried about focusing on the now and winning the NFC West than figuring out who's going to be in the Senior Bowl next year.
Tommy, I've never actually seen you in the chat before, so welcome, man. So he goes, why are we number 31 in blitz rate? No strip sack fumble recoveries. Why don't we coach the punch the ball out? No blitz conservatism is why we lost to San Francisco and allowed Zona to score 2Ds to tie the game late. Well, they're getting home with 4 right now. Like, in a lot of ways, they're creating pressure with 4, and they're keeping more guys back in coverage, which I think – in turn has its own kind of positives and its drawbacks to an extent.
Well, also, if Eamon Wari's not been playing and Spoon's not been playing, those are 2 obvious blitzing defensive backs right there. So when they're not around, I think that's kind of thrown a wrench into their plans, if I can use such a statement. But I think they're going to blitz more, I think, as the season progresses, even though they're getting home with 4. And yeah, I think they're not trying to not force a fumble. It's just that some of that is luck. But yeah, I would like to see them try and go for the peanut punch a few more times. And maybe a strip sack will come because Mayfield has been prone to them this season and somehow he hasn't lost a fumble yet. So, and also they were blitzing at times in the last couple of drives against Arizona. It's just that Arizona was adjusting and burning them with screens. So yeah, there's a time and place for that.
Amy comes in with F-Grub.
Is that the grade you're giving Amy? I'm just going to assume
I
that's
think
the
that's
grade
the
you're
grade
giving, and
Amy's
it's not
giving
short
Ryan
for
Grubb at
anything.
this point. I wonder if things go south with the special teams unit, if we eventually may see an F and J next to it as well. But gotta appreciate Amy's honesty as always. Pete comes in with Seattle needs to run toss sweeps, forget anything close to the middle. They can run close to the middle. You just have to potentially trap or lead with more outside stuff to then get them to widen their splits inside to attack those inside gaps. You can't completely abandon it because it'll cause issues for your play action game. You still have to try and run to the middle, but maybe don't pound your head into the wall doing it consistently in the same way.
Yeah, don't be stubborn, but also don't be so terrified that you disrupt your entire game plan. They've been running plenty of outside tosses. It's just that they got to get better at it, and they still got to at least find ways to be effective on the inside. So it's a tough balancing act, but I'm sure Kubiak and his team are figuring out a way to make it happen. It's not going to be easy, so don't be disappointed if the running game isn't really clicking this weekend, because Tampa Bay's run defense is that good. They have historically, as long as Villa's been in the league, they've been an amazing run defense in the aggregate.
Yeah, they definitely have. I'm just looking through here. Let's see. Anything else? All right. I think we're probably going to wrap this up here, Mookie. So, Mookie, anything currently coming up on field goal that everyone should be paying attention to?
Nothing that I can think of right now, because we are close to game day. I will have my 5 game predictions for the Seahawks versus Buccaneers. I do a 5 game predictions every game day morning, which means a bowl prediction, a offense prediction, defense prediction, an opponent prediction, and then the final score prediction. So those are my 5 predictions. Usually they go extremely horribly wrong. My Kyler Murray, or the Cardinals having under 200 yards of off total offense, was going very well right up until the last drive. So we're getting closer on these bowl predictions. So that's just on my front, but we will have a normal posting schedule on Sunday. I know it's been a little bit out of whack the last few weeks, if you know my situation, but there will be winners and losers. There will be Michael Thompson's 4-down territory, if not Sunday night, then Monday morning. And Ted Zahn also has his Ted's Talk. So you got a slew of post-game analysis write-ups, in addition to the fact that, Bryce, you also got the post-game show. So we've got you covered from game day all the way to the aftermath, maybe even a Seahawks aftermath.
Oh, well played, Mookie. Well played. And yeah, so over here on the Hawks Eye, tomorrow morning, my show with Griffin Sturgeon will be dropping. We broke down Mike Macdonald's defense, and Griff did an amazing job. He brought in some all-22 clips and talk through that whole process. So that'll be dropping first thing tomorrow morning. So make sure you guys check that one out. Check out my live show that I did yesterday with Dana O'Gorman. She brought up some amazing points and perspectives on the Seahawks. And there's also the Hawks Film Lab, which is also coming out as well. Me and Dan dove into Chenna Nwosu's kind of resurgence in the Arizona Cardinal game. And as Mookie alluded, live post-game show will be around 8 or 8:30. I will set that time tomorrow for the live post-game show following the Hawks-Buccaneers game on Sunday night. And then Monday will be Seahawks Aftermath with me and Michael Thompson at 7:45. So lots of content coming you guys' way from the Hawks Eye. So appreciate everybody being in the chat and being respectful in there. It's been great talking with all of you tonight, all 663 of you. It's been awesome. And let's see these retro jerseys come out, and let's see these Seahawks take it to the Buccaneers on Sunday. So with that being said, Mookie, and everything else, everyone have a great night, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.